Hello, 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 and welcome to my video. So today we're going to be talking about heat control for your brew. Now, if you're unlucky like me and you're having to brew in the shed or garage and the temperature's going to be all over the place, then you do need to keep an eye on temperature. If you're brewing in your house, it might be a bit cooler than the brew likes, but it'll still work. It'll just be a little bit slower. Um, the good ways to be able to try and heat is either through insulation or through a heating source. So today we're going to talk about that. Now, what we're going to do, if I can find my slider, here we go. So here we go. It's a nice simple option. Some material wrapped around a carboy. It will help a tiny bit, but only a tiny bit. So personally, I wouldn't try that. You've got the insulation bubble wrap. This does work quite well. You might need to wrap it around a couple of times. It's not so easy to bend it around corners or joints. You might have to cut it and things like that and use some tape, but it does a reasonable job. You can get professional, proper insulated jackets for some carboys as well as buckets. They can be quite pricey though. This is quite shocking, but they often work. Now, these are perfect for if you just want to give it a little bit of a helping hand as such. If you need a little bit of extra boost by hand, then you can get these bags where you can then put bottles around it. And if it's too hot, you can then put cold water or ice cubes in the bottles. If it's too cold, then you can fill them with either hot tap or boiling water, depending on the container. And if those little, they can take it, but they could be quite a good option. But they're not really a long-term thing. So obviously, if you're away from work each single day, is the ice going to sustain all day? Don't know. They do work. The other way is doing it by hand, where you can then get a container, fill it with expanding foam, and put your brewing vessel inside. I've had mixed results in this. I tried this myself here, and this was about 8-9 years ago. So I took an external bin, I wrapped it with a couple of layers of loft insulation, and then wrapped it with some black shrink wrap. I then put about 4 or 5 inches of expanding foam on the bottom and also in the lid, drilled a hole, stuck an airlock in there, and then got some electricity for an immersion heater. Now, this worked really well in containing heat. Unfortunately, worked too well where air couldn't escape, and as a result, the yeast actually killed itself from generating its own heat, which just went exponentially, and it just killed it. So I then binned it after the first go, thinking it's too good. So be wary about that heat buildup. Now, the other ways you could try it is actually with an enclosure. Now, these are really cool and these work well. I was looking at doing one of these myself, but I'm pretty useless at woodwork and just thought it's just going to fail miserably. But this way you can then actually have under the counter or just as an isolated unit made from wood, expanding foam and other bits and pieces that it can help retain the heat. So you're retaining both the hot and cold depending on the weather it is or the weather you're in, and they're really a good option. Now, what I did instead was I got a friend who works at a recycling factory or facility, and he gave me a under-the-counter fridge that had been decommissioned. So the radiator, compressor, all that's been removed. I took that, stripped out that plastic shelf where the compressor goes on the outside, installed plastic and then fiberglass resin it all up to make it airtight, put expanding foam in the back, resealed it all again. So we've now got a nice insulated fridge. And then I could throw my bucket in there. I did rig a single gang electricity plug in there and temperature sensors for my controller, but this way, without all of that, just electricity, you can put your own heat source in and it keeps it nice and warm when it's cold and also quite cooler when it's hot outside, and it really works well. Plus for secondary fermentation, when I'm doing my beers, I got a little patio heater I put in there, and that can then aid that. And then quite often my beers can sit in there for a couple of months sort of thing until I can be bothered to put them in the fridge. That works really well indeed. Now, as to actual devices you can plug in, first one I want to talk about is heat belts. Now, these are really quite simple. Plug in the mains. Some of them come with a little voltage control, so you can control the heat. And all you do is you put this around your bucket, tighten that, and as you can see, that then shrinks up and creates a nice tight seal around your bucket. These are really quite good. They're relatively inexpensive. Downside is they're either on or off or slightly controllable, but you can't tell what the temperature is without then putting a temperature sensor on it, or if you got one of the stickers and reading it. So you don't know, if you're away, you don't know what it's doing. So it's not the best of ways. There are different ones out there. If we look at this one, so other companies make different ones that look slightly differently. The other sort is heat pads or heat mats. This one is a 10-watt single, and this is made for a demijohn. You can buy larger ones like this, which is for a 25-litre brewing bucket. You can also buy, say, like a double, which looks a bit more like that, obviously without 2 LEDs, and that's for 2 demijohns. I was doing a brewing project with 4 demijohns brewing at the same time, so I bought 4 of them, and I even tried putting all 4 down and putting the bucket on top. That then gave me 40 watts of heat, and it sort of worked, but it's better results than the heat belt, but still it's just on or off. These ones here are actually got a controller inside, so when they get too hot they'll switch it off. When it cools down it'll go back on again, but again it's not regulating your heat, it's just giving you a bit of a bonus of a heat, so it won't necessarily, it can't get you to that temperature you want. And there are other versions out there from different companies, and I call that the whoopee cushion version. And yeah, they work quite well. Now, a lot of people use them with timers. So they're literally telling it, like, for example, heat for 1 hour every 3 hours, or only at night time, and then know it gets cold. But again, it's you're assuming you know how long to heat for. You might do. The other way you can control those two is through a controller where plug it into the mains. You've got a temperature sensor, which you then put into your wash, or if you've got a thermo well inside your brewing bucket, you can put that inside the thermo well to measure it. And then it then shows you what temperature it is, and you can also set what temperature you want it to be, or you set, if it goes below this temperature, turn on the power to heat 1, and that's where you can then have your heat mat or heat belt. And then you can then have, some of them have a secondary setting where you can say, but if it reaches too high, then switch plug 2 on, and then there you can have like a desk fan or something just blowing cold air. Admittedly, that won't be doing too much, but you could have another solution, another way of cooling something. These can be really quite cool. One of the world-known brands who do this is called Inkbird, and you can get some wireless version to actually tie into your phone, so you can view and monitor. So this and a heat belt, yeah, good idea. Or this and a heat pad, really good. They do work. The downside you're going to get is, like, this heat belt's 20 or 25 watts, which isn't a great deal of power. So you may find in your environment you need something with a bit more juice. It could be you need 2 or 3 of these. Same as the mats. It all depends on your environment and how cold it is. Now, the last option for heating source is an immersion heater. This is my preferred option. Plug it in, you've got a bung, and you've got a temperature setting on here, which you can then just turn around to what temperature you'd want. Then you sink that into your brewing vessel. The brew will probably about here. You want it quite low to the ground. The lower it is, the more it can then bring the heat up, since it rises. And if you've got it right at the top, the bottom part could be a lot cooler. What it will do is it will then monitor what the temperature is. If it sees it's lower than what you've dialed in on the top, the light comes on, heat comes on. And when it realizes it's gone over, it turns it all off. Nice and simple. Easy to sterilize, easy to use. Now, you can buy a fish tank heater. Many people do. There's many different types and sizes out there. The good thing with the fish tank heater is it's half to a quarter the price of a proper brewing one. The downside is it won't come with a bung or anything like that. So you would need to buy a bung, drill a hole through, cut the plug off, and then very delicately try and get the cable through the hole without breaking or making a gap, because otherwise your airlock's not going to work anymore, because the air or the CO2 is just going to escape out the hole. You don't use airlocks or don't care about seeing airlocks move, so that'll be fine for you, but just be warned about that plug. Now, I love immersion heaters. They're really cool. This, if you buy it from a brewing shop, is 100 watts, and that's rated for a 25-litre wash, so a 30-litre brewing bucket. You can buy them, like here, as low as 25 watts, up to, I think, 1,000 watts. They're quite ridiculous. If you're using a 30-litre bucket, I wouldn't recommend buying anything more or less than 100 watt. 100 watt works perfectly. Anything lower, and you're just not going to get the heat. Anything higher, it could turn on too hot. When it turns on, it could go too hot, and it could then stress, damage, or even kill your yeast. You want a nice controllable heat. So that really works quite well, and that's that. Now, you can often do a combination of the different things. My personal recommendation, if you can, and if you are brewing outside and you really do need that a lot of heat, because it could go to freezing temperatures, get yourself an insulated fridge like I've built, or build yourself a wooden compartment with lots of expanding foam or foam sheets in. That is the way to go. If you're brewing in your house and you need it to go up 2 to 5, 6 degrees, then I would say use an immersion heater. They are perfect. The heat belts and heat pads are good and they do really work, but then you're going to need an Inkbird or some other controller, because otherwise you could still be under or overshoot your temperature and you just won't know about it. So I hope you found this informational and it's giving you some good advice. If you do have a different way or you think I'm wrong, let me know in the notes or in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Please hit like if you did like the videos, because that will help in the search results and this will get more people to see it. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.